Well, what do you need to know about the stock market and your retirement funds? Today we're going to take a look. Stay tuned for Prudent Money. Good afternoon and welcome to the Prudent Money Radio Show. I'm your host, Bob Brooks. Thank you so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. Well, if you got a question for me, I've got an answer for you. Just go to the website at www.prudentmoney.com. Once you get to the website, there is a link at the top of the page that says Ask Prudent Money. Click through there and send me your questions. Love to get questions. I answer all the questions myself, and it's a great way to get to know what you're dealing with and what I can help you with. And most importantly, what we can, topics that probably we need to be covering on the program that maybe we're not getting to. So it helps everybody out. If you've got a question and you need to get an answer to it or an opinion, comments, whatever it might be, go to the website and use that as a resource. It's there for you to do that. Also sign up for the email letter list and make sure that you are getting updated every time we post something. And we are posting a lot at Prudent Money. We're basically wanting to be that other side of the story for you, bring you the information so that you can compare what you're hearing in the financial media to what you're hearing on Prudent Money and compare and contrast and come up with your own set of beliefs when it comes to stewardship of what God has given you. Once again, that website is prudentmoney.com. So why in the world are we even talking about declining markets? And we're going to wrap this up today, by the way. There's a good reason for it. But before I go through that good reason, let me give some background as to what I feel is the stewardship verse for risk, and why I think risk is so extremely important to take seriously and to have a good working knowledge of how it works. Now, let me say this before we get started on any of this. I'm going to go through a lot today and take you through kind of a journey on what you need to know, and hopefully it will lay a framework for what you need to be talking to your advisor about and the conversations that you need to have. I get this often. I don't know what questions to even ask. Well, this should help you with that. And then if you don't have an advisor that you can talk to, you're always welcome to send us an email. We'll answer your questions as well. So there's no way that you can get by without opportunity, which is a big part of this. So if you go to the book of Proverbs, there's a verse in 22:3 and a verse 27:12. Both verses in Proverbs, separated by 5 chapters, and it's the same exact verse word for word. Now I can't remember exactly what the total number of verses in the Bible are, and then the total number that there's duplicate verses, but it's very, very small. I think there's like over 11,000 verses in the Bible, and something like 248 duplicates. But both of these verses together, saying the same thing, puts an exclamation point, I think, on what God's trying to relay. A prudent person foresees danger and takes precautions. The simpleton goes blindly on and suffers the consequences. And this is what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about the prudent person. Now, just because you foresee danger, and at any time, any period of the market, you could come away with a forecast or an analysis and say, this is high risk, this is high risk, and this is high risk. This is what I see in the market. And you could any time you could come up with that, because there's always risk. At the same time, there's also manageable risk and risk that you really, really need to take advantage of, because it could be that it really hurts returns. And so these two verses, I think, really do sum it up. A prudent person foresees danger. We're trying to foresee what's coming down the road. We don't have a crystal ball, obviously, and it's always a loser's game to kind of guess where the market's going. And it is, though, important, I think, if there's enough evidence that would suggest there could be some problems down the road, it makes sense to take precautions. Now, how do you take precautions? Do you go ahead and make changes? Maybe. But I think when I think of taking precautions, I think of drawing out a game plan. This is what I would do if this happened. This is what I would do if this started to happen. This is what I would do if that piece that I had concerning my investments was starting to shift and really coincided with a lot of prayer. And that's another thing that I think is extremely important, is that when we're thinking about money, thinking about decisions, you've got to be thinking about prayer. Prayer has got to be your greatest asset. I was having breakfast today with someone, and we were talking about things that were happening in our lives, and I said, I'll be dealing with something, and then I'll think to myself, when's the last time you prayed about this? And it's just the ultimate in conviction that would come to the conclusion. I said, I gotta be straightforward here and say it's been a little bit since I've prayed about this. And the funny thing about prayer is that it's there to give you peace or not give you peace. And that says something both ways. So prayer is, I think, so very important in the stewardship process, and something that you've got to make sure that you're practicing at all times. So why are we talking about declining markets? Think of it as going to school and learning about hurricanes. You probably already know that markets go down. They go through periods where they go down. We've seen this many times. And we've seen hurricanes come up many times. But if there were better ways to avoid the pain of the inevitable, wouldn't you want to learn how to do that? And that's what today's program is all about. Sorry for the illustration. Probably not the best. But I always like to talk about hurricanes when it comes to the markets. So anyway, how to prepare and the precautions that you take that can help you make the right decisions. And most importantly, it's about educating you on the other side of the story. Because I believe that if you know both sides of the story, you can make good decisions, prudent decisions. And prudent decisions are those that have no emotion. But once again, as the verses say, you want to be a prudent person who foresees danger the best that you can. Once again, we don't have any tools really to do that. And I take that back. There's a lot of analysis tools that can give you a probability that there is danger ahead, and they are giving plenty of evidence of that taking place. The simpleton, though, goes blindly on and suffers the consequences. There's two ways to look at investments. You could look at investment and just close your eyes and hope everything works out. And that's the person who's going to ride out the hurricane. And it may end up being a good deal, a good decision, or a really, really bad decision. Investment based on uncertainty, that's another way you can look at it. Probably the person who's going to leave town. That could end up being a great idea or not so good idea. It takes time and money to do that. So how do you reduce risk or increase risk? Because this is extremely important if you decide that you are going to ride it out. And what I mean by ride it out is if something happens to turn the market on and the direction of the stock market, and it starts to go down and go down aggressively, something would have changed. How are you going to, if you decide that you're going to ride it out? And here's the thing about buy and hold investing, is that statistically, or you should know, there's a good chance that if you ride it out, and there's some caveats to this we'll talk about in a minute, but if you ride out the market decline and wait until the recovery time, and this is what they teach in pop culture finance, not what I completely believe is the best way to go. But if you make up your mind that you're going to ride it out, you go through the volatility, the market loss, maybe it's a bear market, and you get down to the very bottom, or what you think is the bottom is what they're talking about being the bottom on CNBC and all that kind of thing. Are you in the right place for a recovery? And that's what nobody talks about. Okay, so people will participate in not move their money, not have a strategy, what I call a plan B, if the market starts going violently declining for some reason or another. But they don't have a recovery plan. And I just don't believe that it's such a great idea to get back into or stay in at least without evaluating. Maybe you are in the best place to be going back up during a recovery, because it's the recovery that's so very important. And it's important that you get that right. More on that in a minute. This is Bob Brooks. We're up against a break. Stick around. I'll be right back. Hello, this is Bob Brooks. Proverbs 22:3 and Proverbs 27:12 are the exact same verse word for word. I call them the stewardship verses of risk. A prudent person foresees danger and takes precautions. The simpleton goes blindly on and suffers the consequences. On the Prudent Money Radio Show, we teach about risk, how to identify it, how to figure it out, and what to do about it. We believe that to be a prudent steward, you have to be a good risk manager. Listen to the Prudent Money Radio Show on Bible School Radio 91.3. Prudent Money, home of the modern day steward movement.
Dynamic, practical, life-changing.
There's no point in going to church and not letting the Christ who gave birth to the church on the day of Pentecost change your life.
Join us each day as Pastor Paul Shepherd applies the timeless truth of Scripture to everyday life. It's Destined for Victory on this great station.
Weekday afternoons at 3:30 here on Bible School Radio, KDKR.
Hi, I'm Jan Markell, host of Understanding the Times. We're very excited to be a part of Bible School Radio. I hope you will join me Saturday, 10 a.m., for cutting-edge guests and the latest information to help you discern the truth, even the inconvenient truth. We'll help you understand our times and contend for the faith. That's Understanding the Times, Saturday at 10 a.m., right here on Bible School Radio, or anytime at olivetreeviews.org.
Welcome back. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thank you so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. If you got a question for me, I want you to go to the website at prudentmoney.com and send a question in. I'll get you taken care of. That's all at the website, www.prudentmoney.com. We were talking about being in a declining market. When I say declining market, I mean a market that's going down, losing a lot of money, and is very volatile, really shaking the nerves up. But you decide, because statistically, it's the numbers do tell a story that if you hang on, that the market will go back up at some point. Of course, that can always change. Everything can always change. You know that. But let's say that's what you are betting on at this point. And you got a long haul in front of you to get back to where you were before all this started, which is the goal. So this is called the recovery time. Nobody talks about this, but it's just so very important that along the way during a decline in the market, it's always important to assess risk at all times so that you know exactly what level of risk that you are willing to take, and are you taking that? But when we get down to the recovery time, you've got to be able to answer the question, is this group of investments that I came down with in this decline, this bear market, whatever it is this the best set of investments to take me out of it and to recover? And incidentally, any of the things we're talking about today, once again, is to give you ideas of what you would ask your financial advisor. And obviously, whenever we do go through a bear market, which will be at some point because they haven't disappeared and gone away, we'll talk about this and make sure that you're very much so up to speed as to what to look at and what to do. But there are different ways that you can change the risk level, and maybe that's what you want to do. Maybe it's not so much about the funds as it is the risk that they're taking. And maybe you want to change the risk level for some reason. Here's the problem with buy and hold investing and going into this idea of recovery, is that it's pretty simple to talk about the investment strategy where you just hang on, you go through the bear market, you lose a bunch of money, then you recover, because the market always does go back up all the time, according to Pop Culture Finance, and it does, and that works great. And if you hang on and you can get through the emotion, which is really tough, and you come back the other side, you made back all the money that you lost, and now you're back on track again. If you can do that, you've got to accept one thing that is really tough to make back, that you have definitely lost. Not in your money, because your portfolio is back again and made back all those losses, but it's time. And time is crucial with any type of financial planning, but you have to remember that you do lose time. And I don't think this is a great forum to get into. Maybe we'll do this in a workshop at some point, but look for ways to decrease time in the process of the recovery process. It's so very important that you realize that, hey, I've lost a certain amount of time. I need to check my goals, and this is why it's so extremely, extremely important to have a goal set, how you're going to achieve that goal, what you have to do, and where you're supposed to be at the end of each year as far as total retirement funds goes, and that you're on track or you're not on track. And that's what you need to assess. So you may be that you want to reset your goals and your timeline for retirement. May have to. And then maybe you catch up and make back some additional gain quicker than you need to, and you've all of a sudden got back some of that time. But you want to acknowledge the fact that, hey, I lost time. This is where I am. Now I'm going to be on this path. Maybe it sets you back a year. Maybe it sets you back 2 years. Who knows? But you want to make sure that you do look at that and see what makes the most sense. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thank you so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. Let's talk about some final thoughts on, and we've devoted two or three different shows to this topic. But to come and sum it up, first is the whole idea of buy and hold. And it is an investment strategy, and you can can do a buy and hold a lot of different ways. But the bottom line is you got to be able to hang on through some very volatile periods when you might be losing a lot more money than you're comfortable with. And the whole idea is, can you survive that emotion and stay the course? Because that's what your financial advisor is going to tell you, stay the course. And it works out great, or not great. It's nothing great that you have to go through. I mean, the good news is there's not as many bear markets as there are bull markets, but the bear markets that we do have are much worse than the bull markets that do good for the market. Hope that makes sense. So everything's fine. You get the recovery. You're able to, even though you're losing time, you're still looking at how to make it up on the back end. Everything is great until you need the money. And that could be a surprise through a job loss. It could be anything. But you could have ridden out this bear market very close to the time that you'd set for retirement. Then what? And there's a lot of planning that should be going on with advisors that's not about, how do you make that transition in all types of situations so that you're ready for it. Hopefully it won't happen to you. But here's the other thing is that even if you're lucky enough to not run into a situation where you need the money, you got to start taking money out, you're right in the middle of a financial storm. What do you do? How do you handle it? If you dodge that bullet, there's still a good chance that could still happen to you inside of retirement. And I don't know which one is a worse situation, but you got to be ready for both and make sure that you've got a financial advisor that you're working with that can lead you through that particular situation, because it is a tough one. And one of my concerns that I've got about the financial advisor, and actually the financial advisor industry, we'll call it, in the DFW area, is how many have been working, managing money or investing or being a financial advisor since 2008, much less since 2000 when we saw the tech bubble, and then 2007 and 2009 when we had a financial crisis. The extreme importance needs to be set upon the concept of benchmarks. It's invaluable information to know that at the end of each year that you are at a certain spot from the standpoint of accumulating retirement money. So let's say that at the end of this year you're supposed to be at $300,000, and let's say that you're already at $350,000, where you're $50,000 ahead. But what matters is that where you're at the end of the year, and are you ahead of your benchmark, equal with your benchmark, or behind your benchmark? And you can, with that information, you can make some invaluable decisions. In fact, it makes decision making so very much easier. Always remember that you can always reset your goals, and that can make up for lost time, because lost time is the one thing that is really tough on the investments if you are going to ride out a storm. Most importantly, know your advisor's capabilities and beliefs about markets. If they're just going to let you sit through a market decline, a bear market, whatever you want to call it, and just kind of assess things on the way on the back end when you finally get all your money back that you lost, you might want to be asking some questions about why they think that way, and to make sure that they can get you through any type of situation that you end up facing. And any questions about that, you're always welcome to send me an email at the website prudentmoney.com. Emotion, it's the worst. It makes you challenge everything. And it makes you wonder, will I lose everything? Now, one caveat on that before we wrap up today is, obviously, I'd be foolishly irresponsible if I said that that you without question you're never going to lose anything. I mean, lose all your retirement money. Anything can happen. I would say that it's a low probability that it's going to happen. If you are in individual issues of stock, there have been companies that have gone out of business that had stock and investors lose everything. So that it's more likely to happen with individual issues of stock, but it's just a low probability if you're using pretty standard mutual funds. This is Bob Brooks. If you got a question for me, please go to the website at prudentmoney.com and send it in, because we are all out of time. Till we do meet again next time, keep the faith and have a great rest of the day.
That's all the time we have for today. Questions or comments for Bob, or to find out more great information like what you've just heard, visit www.prudentmoney.com. Be sure to join Bob Brooks again for the next edition of Prudent Money.